Welcome to episode 339 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live in our virtual studio on the internet by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is joining us from his conference room on the second floor of McLean Hall, John Scott Sloat.
So this is, Matt, I don't know if you know this is my new office.
Oh, you moved offices. I didn't know this.
I did. I moved down the hall, and believe it or not, this is the room I learned Hebrew in. This is the old seminary classroom I learned Hebrew in.
Wow.
Many, many years ago.
Yeah, that's great.
Our Hebrew professor at the time would give us our final exams, paper and pencil, and then would go to his office down the hall and come back with a giant machete to talk about like Judgment Day and all sorts of things. And I never had another exam like it.
Well, they've certainly updated from chalkboards to whiteboards in there now, because they would have been still chalkboards when you would have taken Hebrew back then. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I believe so.
All right. Well, if you would like to contact the show and share about your own machete wielding experiences, you can contact us on X at VNSPod. You can email the show variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, and we would love for you to leave a 5-star rating on whatever platform you access the show. And so without any further ado, we want to bring in our special guest for the episode here. And we are thrilled to be joined by Dr. Stephen Dempster. This is his official title here. He is Emeritus Professor of Religious Studies at Crandall University. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other things you've done, Stephen, but welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's my honor.
Yeah. So explain to our listeners where Crandall is located, because I wasn't aware necessarily of exactly where in Canada Crandall is located at.
So it's called the Hub of the Maritimes, the Maritime provinces in the eastern coast of Canada, and it's so every car that passes through, or transport truck that passes through, or rail has to pass through Crandall to get to Nova Scotia or Prince Edward Island. The three maritime. So we're in New Brunswick, and so it's a real kind of transportational hub here. And it used to be a main railway hub as well, for the CN. The CN, Canadian National Railway shops, used to be based in Crandall. Yeah, so it's a very strategic place. You have to go through it if you want to go to these provinces.
Okay.
And so, how many years have you served at Crandall?
So yeah, I was there for 37 years.
Wow.
I came in when I was finishing my doctoral dissertation at the University of Toronto. And so I came in 1984 and finished in 2021 during just at the end of COVID. Yeah.
That's getting increasingly rare that someone starts at a place straight out of their doctoral work and then ends up finishing there, 30, 40 years later.
Yeah, well, I was tempted to leave a few times, but I always heard that little thought in my mind, bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not far from Prince Edward Island where you're at.
Right.
In fact, that's where you're joining us from right now, correct?
Well, near the bridge on Prince Edward Island. So I have a son that's lives in Stratford, Prince Edward Island, which is right near the capital, Charlottetown, the home of Anne of Green Gables.
That's right. Yes, my wife will be thrilled when she hears that. Before we actually started recording, you were telling us a little bit about, our listeners know that John and I love sports, and you were telling us a little bit about your father and his near professional soccer career. Tell us a little, tell our listeners about about that.
Yeah, so my parents are from Belfast, and my dad was a he played soccer, grew up. It's like baseball in the United States or football. It's actually called football over there.
Right.
And
Hmm.
so he grew up there, and he became a member of a select team, and then he played for a semi-professional team called, of all things, Distillery, actually, in Belfast. But he was
Okay.
drafted by the elite Premier League of England when he was about 17. And but he had become a Christian, and he was thinking about the ministry, and he decided one night, wrestled with it, and felt that all the kingdoms of the world were before him,
Mm.
and he decided, no, I have to go into the ministry. So
Hmm.
he
Mm.
went to Belfast Bible College in Lisburn and studied there, and then came to Canada afterwards with my mother
Mm.
and their 1-year-old son, my older brother,
Oh,
Sam.
nice.
Okay. Nice.
They
And
used to have, he played what's called at the time center half in the midfield in soccer, and they used to have a saying. His name was Sam, and his name they said, "Bacon, eggs, and ham. Slip it to Sam." Yeah, he
That's
was
great.
good. He was really good, actually. He used to play with us in the backyard, and I could never get the ball from him.
Mm. Yeah.
now I was doing some, Dr. Dempster, I was doing some research prior to hopping on the call here, and I read somewhere that you started the Crandall baseball team
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
coached for a decade. Is that right?
Yeah, almost a decade. So this happened. It would be around 2005, and I was on sabbatical. And so we had to start. We started the team, and it was a club team, but we played big universities because really, as long as you had the skill, you could play. And so I had coached in the Moncton minor league divisions for basically for quite a while because I had two sons that played baseball, and so a lot of the players from those teams followed me to the university, and we decided to have a team, and we had a fellow that was the head of the Canadian Intercollegiate Baseball Association who had just become a Christian, and he wanted Crandall to see if they could get a team, and so we ended up having a team, and our first, so we'd play all our games in the fall. So you have to realize in Canada, you have a short window. And so we
Yes.
started in September, and we usually played two double headers on the weekends. And we had, or a double header on Wednesday and one on Saturday. So we did really, really well. Our first, our first, our first season, we had played 16 games. We were 2-14, if you can believe
Mm.
it. But we were never mercied, and we lost so many games. We had good pitching, but we had no hitting.
Hmm.
Mm.
So I remember counting up the runs. We had 30 runs we scored and 60 runs against in those 16 games. So we had good fielding, good pitching, but no hitting.
Mm.
So it was rough, but then we turned a corner, and within 8 years we had four trips to the Nationals, and
Mm.
we hosted the Nationals in 2011, and we had my son. I asked my son. I said, "We're going to have all these guys here. We'll have a dinner." And we'll get a Christian speaker to come. So he suggested we get Tony Fernandez to come. Well,
Mm.
Tony Fernandez was a shortstop for the Blue Jays,
Yeah.
loves Canada when they won the World Series in 92 and 93. So Tony said that he would come, but he would not take any funds except for travel expenses. He was now a
Mm.
minister down in Florida, I think. He was from the
Wow.
Dominican Republic. But he came and he threw out the first pitch at our
Oh, so
tournament,
Wow.
cool.
and he shared the gospel in his so all these teams that were there would have most of the kids wouldn't have been Christians, and they would have heard the gospel, and it was great. It was just great. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. But after as I was getting older, I wasn't attracting as many, and I didn't have the time to recruit. Um, and as a result, when you can't recruit in sports,
Hmm.
it's very, very rough,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our great problem was we didn't have a deep bench. So all our pitchers played positions, whereas the bigger teams, all their pitchers only pitched. And so it was
Hmm.
rough that way. Yeah.
Huh.
But we had some great things happen. Just, great encouraging things for the Lord happened. I always said to try to attract players. I don't know if it um come and play for the glory of God.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned that so you came to the States. Well, you were born, sorry, you born in Canada. Where your parents migrated from Ireland
Ireland.
to Canada, and you were born. And so have you lived in Canada your entire life?
Yeah, except for 3 years, I studied at Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. So I
Okay.
lived down there during that time. And I've done a sabbatical at Southwestern
Hmm.
for about 5 months. And
Okay.
yeah,
And tell us how you came to know Christ. As
yeah.
was it as a child or was it as a young adult?
Yeah, it was as a child. I was about 10 or 11, and I my dad was a pastor, and so I'd hear the gospel. But it never really dawned on me and what was going on. And one day I realized that I asked my dad, if you can believe it, if he was going to die. And when he said, "Of course," and that just crushed me, just
Hmm.
absolutely crushed, because he was my best friend too. And I said, "What'll I do without my dad?" So my dad then used that as an opportunity to share the gospel and what the new heavens and the new earth would be like, and he
Mhm.
led me to faith at the side of my bed one night, and just continued on the process of discipleship. But I'd have to say that I had about half a dozen conversions, if you know what I mean, after that, recommitments at
Yeah,
various
sure.
times, and so yeah, and just to make that decision, I'm going to follow Jesus,
Hmm.
and come all these difficulties and all these temptations that are out there. And so I had to make that decision a number of times. And I still remember a number of them where it was absolutely, this has to be the way, And
Hmm.
so, yeah, so I had sort of recommitments, I guess.
What did your path to academia look like? I assume you went to college somewhere, eventually
Yes.
seminary. What
Yes.
what sort of things did you study? What did that
Yeah.
process look like?
So I was very much interested in athletics. And I played football in high school and track in high school and that. So I was really thinking I would want to go in that direction. So I took kinesiology, or what we used to call physical education, at the University of Western Ontario, which is now Western University. And I tried out for the football team, but I didn't make it. And looking back on it, it was kind of a godsend, because I had a few what we'd call bell ringing moments, and that would be they now call them concussions, and
Yeah.
but you just basically you see stars, and I'm so glad that looking back, it was a disaster for me at the time, but looking back, it was a good thing. So what I did was I started sharing my faith with my students, and colleagues in class, and that, um, and uh, and I just found that I really became interested in sharing, and seeing some people come to know the Lord, and then trying to get answers for them. I would read books by Francis Schaeffer and others, that would try to get, and C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was a godsend for me. But I would try to do that, and as a result, I said, I need more answers. So my dad was reformed in his theology. And so he suggested, and he was very impressed by Westminster Seminary because he had heard of Edward Young, who was an Old Testament person there, and Cornelius Van Til and others. And so I was sort of very interested. And as a result, I applied to the seminary and was accepted. And this would have been from I was there from 1975 to 1978. And did a Master's of Arts in Religion. Basically, it's an MDiv without the practical theology, and then a Master of Theology in Old Testament. My teachers there would have been Ray Dillard and Palmer Robertson. Palmer's still going strong, actually, unbelievable, Anyway, and then in history, like I was really moved by Claire Davis and Harvey Kahn, and Harvey Kahn has gone to know the Lord, has gone to be with the Lord now, too. So these were and Richard Gaffin as well was someone who really stimulated me. So that led to my interest in the Old Testament because I realized how little I knew of the Old Testament, and as a result, I said I got to go and study. So I went to U of T to study, and was there for till 1985. From 1979. Yeah.
And so obviously part of studying the Old Testament is studying Hebrew. At what point would you say that you kind of embraced or fully, I don't know if you'd say you fell in love with Hebrew, but like you really began to enjoy it and found it valuable? And was that still in your master's degree, or was that something that happened
No,
in
that
your
was
PhD
at the
program?
seminary, and I would say it had to do with just the teaching of Hebrew. We had a number of grad students that taught as well, but I do remember being very heavily influenced by Ray Dillard, and it was just contagious to be in his classes, and I mean, he just brimmed over with interest and love of the language. And I just think, sometimes it's better caught than taught. And I got that. And I found that I had a gift for it. So I just, I loved it. I just loved it. I just grew to love the language and to see also how it affected interpretation and that kind of thing. So it's something and so when I decided to go to the University of Toronto, I went into a classical Hebrew language and literature with some focus on Old Testament studies. But the Hebrew would have been very theologically neutral in that sense, like whereas the Old Testament studies were slanted towards very liberal theology. Mm-hmm.
What about, you write so eloquently, and I'm so familiar with your work in Genesis, and we're reading your book, The Return of the Kingdom, with our listeners currently. At what point did you have sort of I don't know if the right term is an aha moment that the whole storyline was woven together and connected, and what was that understanding like for you?
Yeah, it was amazing, and it was really as a result of a sabbatical that I had in about 1994, and I had the chance actually to read through the Hebrew text from beginning to end and look at various things. And I was also really interested in the whole idea of the canon at the time. And I noticed these seams, which I felt were seams, and others had said the same thing. And I said, there is a kind of, how would you put it? My training at the University of Toronto had been very stressed, very, how would I put it, atomistic exegesis, that it was, you never really got beyond the individual text. So, for example, when I was taking a course on Job, I had to spend 9 weeks on Job chapter 3, going through all the various exegetical steps from textual criticism, tradition criticism, all that up till the end. And then you never really got a sense, though, of the whole message of the book. And as a result, that was my kind of training. But during this time, I had a chance to look at these wide swaths, and then I realized, that when comments were made in the New Testament, that this was not kind of cherry picking, myopic exegesis on the part of the New Testament authors searching for these texts which would to help them prove Jesus was the Messiah. But no, this opened up a whole context, when they quoted this. And one of the books that really I remember reading again, which I didn't really quite understand it, was a book by C.H. Dodd, According to the Scriptures. And he showed how all of these texts made sense in a larger framework, and that really, really, that was my kind of aha moment. And so I started to see the whole Bible then as a story. Yeah, so it was that kind of thing. And it was a result of trying to read widely about these things, and then looking back and seeing where I had made mistakes in the past by assuming that the author didn't know a larger context, and yeah. So
Well, I think
the idea of canon and biblical theology connected to me.
Yeah.
Well, and that comes out very clearly in Dominion and Dynasty. And I know I've told you this personally, and I think I've mentioned this on the pod, that that is one of probably the 2 or 3 most influential books in how I read the Bible that I've read, and I recommend it widely. But I just remember how reading through that book and how it was my first real exposure, I think, to that blend of biblical theology and canon at the same time, in terms of how you try to show the canonical progression of God's revelation by working through the storyline following the Hebrew canonical order, which is different than our English Bibles, and the sort of interpretive insights that come out of that are still there in our English Bibles, but harder to see without maybe following both the Hebrew text as well as the canonical flow.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, thank you. It's very humbling to realize it was just something that I was really, and it was during a time when also my dad was going through a very difficult time, and he passed away, and I had been very concerned about this idea of vision and how vision really affects your understanding. And one of the passages that I was thinking about in the Psalms was Psalm 73, where the vision of the psalmist was opened as he went into the tabernacle and saw things differently as a result of the story of God there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do want to get us to the book of yours that we have been reading. You've written so much that we could talk a long time about the different things that you've written. But we've been working our way through The Return of the Kingdom, a biblical theology of God's reign. And I wanted to ask, there's an ongoing debate within biblical theology about sort of storyline versus thematic approach, and is there a central theme? And obviously, you make a compelling case for the importance of the theme of kingdom, and do a wonderful job of retelling the storyline of the Bible with that lens in view. But maybe talk us through how you think about the relationship between kind of a storyline approach and a thematic approach, because I think you do a great job of kind of bringing those together.
Yeah, well, basically, one of the things that you need to do, and I did this in Dominion and Dynasty and other places, but the beginning and the ending of any kind of literary work are absolutely critical. And
Hmm.
they let you know if this is more of an anthology or if, just a collection, or
Mm.
like the Book of Proverbs, for example, or is there some kind of ongoing connection through the text? And so that was it's just it was a literary, simply a literary approach in that sense, not at all discounting, as often is the case in literary studies, the historical reality of these stories. But it was this idea of the beginning and the ending, and then looking for kind of these thematic, how would you put it, core texts which are there. And the more I think about it, because I've had more time in my retirement to think about these things, not being pressured at all, you do have these kind of core texts where somehow Israel went wrong, you know. So, for example, in Isaiah 5, 1-7, about the God planting the vineyard and doing everything possible for the
Hmm.
grapes to come up, and so that they would be enjoyed by the whole world, really.
Yeah.
This is the mishpat and tzedakah, justice and righteousness. But when he brought them up, they became mishpak and tzedakah, that is literally ripping people off or ripping their flesh apart, and the result is they're crying out because of oppression. And
Mm.
God wanted to make this into Israel into a place of healing for the world, and they had turned it into a further place of oppression. So that's kind of a core text. You have the same thing in Micah 6, where what is God looking for? You know, he brought Israel out, he delivered them from oppression in Egypt. He wanted them to be a light to the nations. And in fact, what happened? And then you get, within the prophets themselves, which is in the middle of the text, you get these longings for the new world and the new heavens and the new earth, and you get this desire back in Genesis chapter 1 as well, or Genesis chapter 3, and etc. And then this doesn't happen. You know, there is an individual that's going to come that's doing this, doesn't happen. And then you get, of course, the first century, where there is this expectation with John, who John is thinking about this, and the whole idea of the kingdom is on people's minds, a place where God is going to rule. He set up this rule at the beginning. It was thwarted in a sense. He's going to reset it, and so there's this expectation that it's going to happen in the New Testament era. And so Jesus and John's words are really repent, and the kingdom of heaven is here. It's coming, or it's
Hmm.
here. And then he sees Jesus, and Jesus is the one, and he recognizes that. And and Jesus's words are the same: repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. The king is here, and John sees that. And then John, of course, uh, his expectations are different than Jesus's. He thinks the kingdom is going to come in a certain way. And what happens is he gets, because of his prophetic encounters, he is thrown into prison, and it's not happening. And so then he comes to Jesus, or he sends his disciples to Jesus to ask, is this
Hmm.
really the way it's supposed to happen? Are you really the Messiah? I thought I was so sure. And
Yeah.
Jesus just says, he quotes to him from Isaiah 35, and he says, look, people are being healed. And then he adds, the lepers are being healed. And then he says, the dead are even being raised. Blessed is the one who's not scandalized in me.
Mm.
And it's very, very kingdom oriented. John was expecting all these things to happen, the highway of holiness, where evil will be banished and all this kind of thing. And here he is in prison. Jesus says, hold on, John, the timing isn't right. And
Mm.
it's going to happen, but it's going to happen in installments. It's happening with me now. It's going to happen in installments. And then he's, people think he's criticizing John. He says, you know, was John basically this person who, was wishy-washy, blowing in the wind? No, he was someone who was more than a prophet, greater than all the prophets. And then he
Mm.
said, there's no one greater than John. But he said this, And this shows you the radical newness. The one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And
Hmm.
that is, there's something new that has happened with Jesus. He's bringing this kingdom, which was promised in the Old Testament, and it's on his mind, but it's the timeline is different. And then when Jesus is, Jesus goes to the cross, he is resurrected. Um, we find he then sends out his disciples into all the world to preach this good news. Um, and just before he ascends, the disciples are saying, "Is this time to restore the kingdom to Israel?"
Yeah.
In other words, they're still thinking in this political way. And Jesus
Yeah.
said, "No, look, you're going to go starting in Jerusalem, Samaria, and to all the uttermost parts of the earth. The kingdom is going to come someday." And really, I think that's really the amazing thing I find, though, how this kind of thing is shaped, uh, that the kingdom is, I think, it's absolutely ubiquitous, this language in the Gospels, but it's
Hmm.
very rare in Paul's letters. It's very rare in Acts as well.
Yeah.
And but the issue is this: the Spirit is hardly mentioned in the Gospels, but it's everywhere in Acts and in the epistles. And
Hmm.
so a lot of people say, well, that's a big contradiction, but I think I can't remember the name of the scholar. He's a Mennonite scholar. And James Dunn, the New Testament scholar in the United Kingdom, said, no, this is not a contradiction. This
Hmm.
is the reality. The kingdom is the kingdom is present in the spirit,
Hmm.
the new
Yeah.
reality of the spirit. But yet we still see sickness, we still see all of these kinds of things, but someday that's all going to be gone, and when the gospel goes to the entire world, and so the kingdom comes. So I guess that's I just am amazed at this, and one of the things that really strikes me about this is I was thinking about this the other day when I had to write an article on the resurrection. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking about the resurrection, thinking about the Old Testament evidence for the resurrection. It's not that much there, but it is there just the same. And then thinking about resurrections that Jesus, the widow of Nain, her son,
Hmm.
Lazarus, and there are resurrections. We have two in the Elijah Elisha stories, three actually in the Elijah Elisha stories. But the difference is they died again. But
Hmm.
with the ascension, we have this resurrection where Jesus is actually alive right now, and he's
Yeah.
on the throne of the universe, and he'll bring it to an end, the history to an end someday. But
Mm.
it's just so radical, and the point I think which Paul is making, and other New Testament writers, is that Jesus' resurrection is the first of the new heavens and the new earth, and
Mm.
that's the reality. So when people say that, the New Testament writers and the New Testament church was so, how would I put it, so wrong about the idea that of the return of Jesus because they expected it in his lifetime. Of course they did. In many ways, of course they did. Why? Because it had
Mm.
already started.
Yeah.
It had already started, and so you have to think about it that way. And it's not because they're wrong, but it's like the down payment's been made, as Paul would say, and the first fruits are here. That means everything's going to happen. And I guess it's a
Hmm.
great encouragement too for us, as we grow older and we see people. I go to more funerals now than marriages, and
Hmm.
it's just you see the relevance of this so powerfully.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. John, I think you got a question there. Go ahead and fire away.
Yeah, just getting back to biblical theology a little bit. I remember being in seminary and I was in Matt Harmon's New Testament theology course. And as young men who are in seminary do, we're all gathered outside the classroom talking, and somebody looks at me and goes, "This biblical theology stuff, all the themes, all the threads, it all breaks down around wisdom literature.
Mm,
And I remember going,
mm.
that's interesting. And I've noticed that as as you progress through some of these themes and through some of these threads, wisdom literature seems to be a bit of a speed bump
Yeah.
for biblical theology. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you think about wisdom literature? You have a chapter in here from the
Yeah.
writings in your Kingdom book, but just
Right,
even
right, right.
broader than that, how do you think about the wisdom literature in
Yeah.
biblical theology?
Yeah, well, I think of it this way. I think that's a really good point. Um, and there is actually a recent book on this by Brian Tays,
Hmm.
um, called "The Sages," or what you'd call uh, these sages, a discussion about with each other,
Hmm.
of the various sages, the Book of Ruth, and that kind of thing. And I do think you're right. I do think that there is this stress on wisdom in the third section of the Tanakh more than the others. And there is a book that was kind of influential in my understanding. I don't always agree with the author of this book, but but he wrote this kind of seminal book called The Creative Word by Walter Brueggemann, where he talks about the Torah, and he talks about the Nevi'im, and he talks about the Ketuvim, the writings, and he does talk about it in terms of the different epistemologies.
Hmm.
So the Torah is the kind of ground uh, prophet of Moses, and the priest then becomes the one who interprets that for the people and applies it to their lives. And then the prophet is someone who stresses the word, the davar, and he's sort of trying to connect that Torah with people's lives and their present and the future, calling them back to the covenant and that kind of thing. And the sage, what is the sage's job? The sage, it seems to me, reflects on the creation of the world, the created order of the world, in a way that stresses creation, and I think I would say also God's kingship. And he's trying to what is happening with the book of Proverbs? It's trying to give people in their present day life ways in which they can see God's order in creation and live that out. For example, John, I'm trying to think of his name. It's not John. It's the guy who wrote Graham Goldsworthy says when he deals with wisdom literature says he says this. He says, you know, Israel. There comes a time when Israel can't expect a holy war uh, once every month and seven miracles every week. But there comes a time where they have to apply the knowledge of being in the image and likeness of God from Genesis 1 to 3, um, and and uh, and the fact that God is a creator, and that they've got to take that and live it out in their lives, in their present lives, and in a sense, so you get a book of prayers of how we are to call upon God. Now, in many of those prayers, you do have references to the historical acts, but in others of the prayers, like the acrostic psalms, like Psalm 111 and 112, Psalm 111 is all about Yahweh and
Hmm.
his attributes, but Psalm 112 is the same thing about the fear of a human being who is in love with Yahweh, and he is to represent those qualities to the world. So I guess in
Hmm.
a way, I would say wisdom literature is kind of the fleshing out of the kingdom, living
Hmm.
it right now in the present as we wait for the future. Um, it's interesting, and there is an eschatology there to some degree, because the book of Job is that idea of, I think myself, of his answer comes in the future, you know, through the present, where he sees God's kingship over all creation, and he sees finally I would say, the destruction of Leviathan and Behemoth. And I think that personally, if you look at that Leviathan and Behemoth, I do think that they are images of evil that humans cannot deal with. And so you get these kind of, and this is wisdom literature, you get this satanic figures, which God will ultimately destroy someday. And it's really interesting, by the way. In the Septuagint of the Book of Job, there's an short edition at the end of Job expecting the resurrection, expecting the resurrection after.
Hmm.
So yeah, there is an eschatology there, and I'm just trying to think through. And I would say the same thing. There's kind of an eschatology in Ecclesiastes too, as you move towards the end. Now, most people don't see that, but it's a kind of a judgment of God in the future, which will it'll kind of relativize. It relativizes all of the stress there on death, but those things like death is just, how would I put it? Death is just everywhere in the book of Ecclesiastes, and someday we're going to die. You have this kind of I call it an autobiographical odyssey of the king, who is there at the beginning looking and searching, and then finally you have this old house in decline, which is about death that's coming to us all. Then you get judgment. So there is that kind of when you put it all together, I think there is this there. But I hear you. It's not as transparent, but I think it's very practical in the meantime. And when you think about Jesus too, he is very much a sage, isn't he? He's a prophet,
Yeah.
he's a priest, but he's a sage. I mean, the Sermon on the Mount, there's so much of that. The ending, like the wise builder and the foolish builder, all of these things. But yeah, I anyway, it's a great question. I just finished teaching a course on wisdom literature in Toronto, at the Toronto area, Cambridge, Ontario, and I really, I called it living with open eyes, because
Hmm.
that's what I call the wisdom literature. It's trying to get us to realize, well, the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. And I mean, the fear of Yahweh, I mean, what does it mean, the fear of Yahweh? It's concrete obedience.
Mhm.
It's there in Genesis 22. I think that's one of the first places it occurs. I know that you fear Yahweh. You fear me, the angel says. And
Hmm.
yeah, so anyway, those are just some thoughts about that.
Oh, that's really
Yeah,
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
that's helpful. I want to switch gears just slightly because I know one of the things our listeners enjoy hearing about is not just academic expertise and those sorts of things, but um, do you read much fiction?
Yeah,
And what fiction stands out to you? What kind of fiction do you enjoy most, or maybe even what's kind of shaped your imagination?
yeah,
Um, because I don't know the answer to this, but if I were a betting man, I have to think that you read and enjoy fiction based on the way that you write.
yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
yeah, tell us a little bit about your experience with reading fiction and what stands out to you, has been shaping to you, influenced you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole idea of story, that
Hmm.
that really is something else. But I guess two of my favorite novels, or if you call them novels, are um, the first is Crime and Punishment by
Mm.
Dostoevsky.
Yep.
And that's funny. The first time I read that, I was working in a prison, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I was learning about it. But the thing that really strikes me about that, in fact, I spoke in a prison just recently, and I've had students that have been in prison, and I remember going to one student, and the thing. Let me get back to Dostoevsky, but the idea is here: this individual wants to live as if he's Napoleon. Wants to live in complete autonomy. He's not
Mm.
bound by any rules or anything else, so he decides to kill the landlord for no other reason that he can do it. and get away with it. And so he does that, but he ends up killing a relative as well that was there. And then the next rest of the book is about his attempt to live that way, but being pursued by a detective. And so
Hmm.
he's fraught with this guilt and this awareness that he'll be caught someday. And finally, he meets this woman, and she's kind of a hooker, but she's almost like a Christ figure. And he's led to confess what he's done. And when he confesses to the authorities what he's done, he goes to prison. He goes there, and he's going to spend his sentence there. But when he gets inside prison, he kisses the earth because he's free. He's free.
Hmm.
Uh, the bars were never really an issue. He wasn't free when he was outside. And Dostoevsky is telling us something about human nature. And I've shared
Hmm.
this with one of my students. I said, you're in here, um, but you can be freer inside this prison than outside. And it's true. It is absolutely true. When he got out, he was back into drugs and back into this. But finally, the Lord got a hold of him, and
Hmm.
and he's now he's now married with two children, and he leads a recovery group of 40 people every week,
Wow.
That's
in his
great.
church. But I mean, that's the idea of like sin takes its grip on you, eh? And we need that freedom that comes with confession, and Christ can give it to us. The other book that I read to my kids probably three times was the book by Tolkien, of course, Lord of the Rings. And
Mm.
I just can't get over the imagery in that, the redemption in that, the nature of evil in that, and how you think you're in control and it's in control of you, and finally the ending. And he has this statement in one of his essays called a eucatastrophe, in which
Hmm.
something which is going to absolutely destroy things, absolutely, is turned around and made into a great victory. And that's the
Yeah.
gospel, is it not?
Hmm.
Yeah.
The cross. Those are some of the books and of course, I've always been, um, yeah, from high school days, interested in George Orwell and Aldous Huxley and these non-Christian thinkers that really have written books about our time, And
Yeah.
I still remember one of my mentors. He was a pastor, my pastor, and he had a sermon about Winston Smith and versus us, and it was based on Psalm 139, how God knows everything, everywhere where we are. Uh, and Winston Smith, of course, in 1984 is every Big Brother knows everything about him, and it's not for uh, good reasons; it's for oppressive reasons. And
Hmm.
how God knows us, wherever we are, and His love is upon us. It's just unbelievable to know as we are known. These are amazing things, and then Huxley, which is probably the issue. I think it was the uh, uh, the communications prof who talked about the difference between 1940, 84, and Brave New World, Huxley and Orwell, and he said, really, we don't have to fear so much Orwell, but although with AI and everything else, you wonder, but but we do have to fear this idea where no one will want to read a book.
Yeah.
Reading won't be bad. No one, and it's the issue of a pleasure society gone mad. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so those would be some, yeah.
So you've hit on several people that Matt and I love to read. Huxley, Orwell, Tolkien. I have not read, of the three of us, have not read Crime and Punishment. Matt has been trying to get me to read Crime and
Yeah.
Punishment.
It's a
Um,
Yeah.
tough book to get started, but once you get started, man, you can't stop.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, we did an episode a few weeks ago about our favorite fiction authors, and Dostoevsky was one of mine. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
very much so.
Now, I have to ask, did Tolkien's Return of the King play
Yeah.
into the title of your book that we're reading?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Good,
And
good.
so they made me change it to The Return of the Kingdom. The publishers, because they said when people Google that, it's going to come immediately to Tolkien and not to you. And so I did. That's not a bad thing, but it was the
Yeah.
Return of the King. Now there is a scholar at from Southern, and I can't think of his name. He's written on the Psalms, and he calls his book The Return of the King too. I mentioned it
Hmm.
in my book in a footnote. I forget who it is, but
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
it's on the Psalms. It's a
Interesting.
eschatology of the Psalms or something like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that just thinking about oftentimes the Psalms are classed as wisdom literature, but there's
Hmm.
such an eschatology in the Psalter when you
Yeah.
think about it as it moves toward
Yes.
the end. Everything
Yeah.
breaks forth in praise.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we are going to to move on to our closing segment of one thing we liked. And so, John, I'm going to start with you. What's your one thing you liked this week?
Yeah, so I've started a new biography that I've been reading, American Prometheus, which is the story of Oppenheimer, who developed the A
Hmm.
bomb, and it's a phenomenally well written biography, and it has
Hmm.
been
Yeah.
great to read and to just these incredibly influential men in society, and to just read like. Well, he was collecting rocks on the Upper West Side and categorizing them at like the age of 5, according to their
Right.
Latin genus and all these things. It was just very, very cool.
Hmm. Yes, and I believe that was a major influence on Christopher Nolan's movie Oppenheimer. I don't
Yes.
know how closely it follows the book, but I know that was an influence in the way that Nolan portrayed Oppenheimer. So
I have not
I've been
seen the movie, but
really
I have not
No, I
watched the
haven't
movie.
either. I've
No,
wanted to.
but I'm
all
excited about the
right.
book.
Yeah. Stephen, what about you? We always ask our authors to chime in here. So one thing you liked this week could be anything.
Yeah. Well, one thing we've come to we have a little trailer on the ocean, and it's about an hour from the city. And one thing I've just really loved is the quietness.
Hmm.
Mm,
Just the quietness. Yeah, you get so used to noise where we live and everything else, and it's just the quietness. And so, in a way, it's kind of like a little retreat.
yeah. So, where your position, can you still hear the ocean?
Yes, you can hear the ocean, but you don't
Okay.
hear anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds very peaceful. And
yeah, it is really good because where we live, it's always noisy, but you don't realize it until you come
mhm,
to a place where
Yeah.
it is that kind of peaceful. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I imagine you're probably far enough away from city lights as well that the evening sky is
yes,
much more
yes.
dramatic. Yeah.
That's right. Yes. And my wife and I usually go for a walk on the beach during for about an hour or so, and she
Hmm.
loves sea glass. And so
Hmm.
we're picking up sea glass on the beach, but it's just beautiful. It's very therapeutic, I'd say. And just
Yeah.
when you think about it, the creation, it is it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's when we really, really think about it, it is amazing the complexity and God, and what he's done. Yeah. Anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, on a much less significant level, mine is a movie that I saw this past week. Jack Ryan Ghost War. I don't know if you've seen this advertised on Amazon Prime. And again, this is no great work of cinema. This is pure summer movie popcorn entertainment level kind of stuff. And so um yeah, it was, if you go into it with proper expectations, you're going to walk away thinking, yeah, that was an entertaining couple of hours, but didn't change my life. So, yeah, that's what I went with this week. So that is my one thing I liked. All right, well, Stephen, thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
joining us, and it's good to connect with you. We often get a chance to chat at least a little bit at the annual academic conference, wherever ETS is in a given year. So good to see you virtually and chat with you and get our listeners exposed to you. So thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, it's been an honor, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, John, we have talked about many facets of Stephen Dempster's life. We've talked about his books, his interest in fiction. We've talked about his dad's near professional soccer career and turning away from that to do ministry. And we have talked about American Prometheus, the book that you have recently started on Oppenheimer. We've talked about Stephen just enjoying the beauty of creation near the ocean and the quietness. And we've talked about the movie Jack Ryan, Ghost War. So I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.
God bless. Thank you.